And welcome to Presbycast. If you thought 2020 was weird, welcome to our first show of 2021, where now apparently our intro music is really good. So this is certainly a change for the show.
It's Christian prog rock.
I mean, it was. What is the Christian equivalent to the Court of the Crimson King?
Someone who is the son of one of these band members commented today that his dad was in I posted the album cover to this thing today, and one of the band members' sons noticed it. So it's a real thing. And the name of their album had brokenness in the title from 1980. So nothing new under the sun.
It's true. Future Hall of Famer Chris Jericho posted a picture recently on social media of him with Striper merch sent to him by Michael Sweet himself. So it's coming around again. We make the joke. Or we've always said on Presbycast we never had to go seek out new material for show topics. I don't know if that's ever been more true than right now. We had to do exactly zero research tonight, so that makes our job easy. Remember, kids, it's not laziness, it's called efficiency. So I'll leave it to Chortles to introduce our guests, and then we'll fire away.
Well, we've got the one of the various third Presbycasters. Third, that's right. Dan Borvin, he's been on recently, but that doesn't stop us from having him back on, because he's out there in the belly of the beast in California, and I think our other guest works out. It's Sean. So, are you guys with us?
We're here.
Greetings from the People's Republic of California.
Right.
Well, somebody's got to live out there, I suppose, and. So how's the new year starting for you guys?
Pretty slow, really. Not much going on, Twitter's kind of dull. Just really quiet, actually.
Well, there are fewer people on Twitter, that's for sure.
All right.
Just they dumped about 10% of them.
Is it
I'm
possible?
busy year-round. So.
Is it possible the rapture happened and we missed it? We have not examined this possibility yet. There could be quite a few cars left unmanned.
Well, I wish we'd all been ready, as they say. One of our favorite terrible pieces of music. So, well, first of all, Dan, what level of angst and fear and loathing do you see and hear out there in California?
Oh, there's a lot of angst. Mr. Newsom, who's trying to hold on to his job by the skin of his teeth, is staring down a recall, which today his aides called a coup attempt and an insurrection.
Oh.
Which is in the Constitution of the state of California, but apparently it's a coup attempt. So who knows? We might have a new governor soon. I wouldn't shed a tear, but the next one would probably be worse. So
have you thrown your hat in the ring? Because it seems like I remember you're in a Dutch Reformed denomination, and it seems like there was this Dutch Reformed guy who was the prime minister of the Netherlands at one time. So
I'm running on the Kuiper Party. I've ordered a metric ton of hair gel to compete with Mr. Newsom. You got to go hair to hair if you're going to do this. You can't come with a soft fro if you're going after the Gavin. So we're working on it.
This is also exciting, though. I think one of the first times I ever voted was the original Gray Davis recall.
Oh, so you voted for Arnie?
I did. I did. His signature now.
Te absolvo.
It is now broadly emblazoned across my bachelor's degree from San Diego State, as the governor's auto pen is on all of them. So,
well, the best thing you can say about Arnie is he wasn't the worst governor of California.
All right, Sean,
you're in a free worse than Jesse Ventura.
Sean's in a free state, so let's hear his perspective on the first 12 days of 2021.
It's pretty much how it was. We were fairly well opened up, and we're trying to scream and push or the rest of our way there. I'm doing year-end stuff for my occupation, so I'm plenty busy. We have finally started to evict people again in my world. So there's much wailing and gnashing of teeth, but we bore with it long enough, and we kind of got to go. We got to get the economy open. And what's good is, so I see Cuomo. So Biden gets elected, and the day after the electoral count gets confirmed or certified, Cuomo comes out with, "Hey, we got to get the economy open. We can't do this anymore." So it is, and they are who we said they were. So
what is it? I think it was Neon Taster on Twitter who said, like, you either live long enough to become a lockdown hero, or you die only to become Ron DeSantis.
Okay.
Well, so here's a prediction I have. The PCR test that they use for the COVID test, they've got them spun up to 37 or 40 cycles, which makes them extremely sensitive. And, basically, if you ever walked by somebody with COVID 3 months ago, you might test positive on a PCR test. So I expect in the next month or two, a study from some respectable medical school saying we really need to only do about 25 cycles on the PCR, and that's going to make your case rate go down dramatically. I think that's something to watch for, and could very well happen.
Yeah.
But who am I to say? I just listen to a lot of podcasts. But
yeah, I think it's pretty well determined. Most of this was manufactured, so at least
it's real, and people, people die and people get sick.
Right, but the response to it was out of accord with what was actually happening. I mean, our case rates, as far as I know, everywhere, whether you're masked, locked down, not masked, not locked down, are spiking everywhere. They just are. We're all getting it. We're all getting some variation or some load of it, and
it's almost like it's flu season.
Right?
We cured that.
Well, not that it helps, but it seems obvious to me that if we hadn't locked down and this had been able to circulate in the summer when people could handle it better, that might have been a good move.
Yeah.
We might be nearer herd immunity, if there is any such thing. Well, that's
the good news
COVID.
is when the economy tanks and everybody blames the lockdown, none of the politicians will have been for it at that stage.
Yeah, they changed their stories. So COVID's one thing, but what's gone on in Washington in the past week is another. So I think we probably should talk about that for at least a while. And let's go ahead and kick it off with Fun with Baptist, because I've got a clip from this is one of the smarter, younger IFB pastors. I think he's in Kentucky. No, I mean he's sort of slick for one of these guys. But let's hear Fun with Baptist, and this is very topical because it was a Facebook live stream from yesterday. That's not him.
That's the other guy.
I didn't hit the Fun with Baptist theme, so maybe I moved it. I loaded the board up so heavily last time. Well, we'll just go right to it. This is Brother Andrew Sluter, and we'll let this play for a minute and stop. And Dan, you're a pastor. This is good for you because you probably forgot to do a live stream on Trump yesterday, so maybe you can make up for it tomorrow. But here's a model for it.
Is this recorded from the front seat of his car?
No. He's got a Blue Yeti mic with no pop filter, so he does pop a bit, but it'll be all right. Here we go.
With stuff like that. What's going on? So that happens. Then there are all these reports that start flooding in. They get that fixed. The reports of the 15,000 troops come in. And then there's all this other information that are coming through. Again, I'm only giving you what is confirmed. I'm only giving you what is confirmed. We're not giving any false information out there. We have websites and screenshots and verification from credible news sources and all that kind of stuff that this stuff is true. Okay, so we're not giving you any misinformation. Now, news reports came out now that there are planned protests in every armed protests that are planned in all 50 states from January 16th through at least January 20th. That was on the local news here.
All right. So
Also,
so far, are you pretty impressed with what he's bringing to the table? Because he has websites and screenshots.
I think he's vying for
He
Alex
sounds
Jones's
a
job.
lot- I mean, he sounds kind of like us in that respect. I mean, that's about all we bring to the table.
Oh, that's not what you were supposed to say. Yeah,
No,
I mean,
he's
this
a
is
total
on,
whack job. Yeah, wow, what
it's
a
on
fringe guy.
his church Facebook stream. So that's what you. Well, and Phil says that Sluter is in Asheville, but I think he might have moved to Kentucky. We'll see. He's
Well, I begin every
closest.
sermon with, "I swear this is true. This is confirmed information." This is not a conspiracy theory.
So he did
I
this
used-
on a Sunday. This was his Sunday message.
No. I think it was Monday, yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on the 11th. So, yeah, that's I
This
don't
was his
know anybody.
entrepreneurial self.
Right. I don't know anybody that went to Washington. I don't know anybody that believes in QAnon. But there are certainly people out there that believe strange things, and somehow, of course, I don't know if you're dispensational, premillennial, that all it's got to play into it as well. But certainly, brother.
I do want that buffalo headdress, though. I'm pretty desperate for that at this point.
That guy's got an Etsy page.
I think you just pick it up at his. Well, who's the? What was the joke? Is like, what did the guy say to his mom before he got arrested, or what did his mom say to him? Bison,
Bison.
buffalo, bison. Yeah. That's
I
why I
thought
do
of
a
taking
podcast,
up-
not stand-up comedy.
Yeah, I thought of taking up Odin worship after I saw that whole thing. So
Yeah, pagans are offended.
if I can wear that, if I can walk around like that, hey,
Let's see what else Brother Sluter has to say.
there was an armed protest right outside the offices of Andy. How do you say his name? Andy Bashir, the governor of Kentucky. Armed protests right outside of Andy Bashir's, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the governor of Kentucky, right outside his window, right outside his office there. Now, let's just put some perspective on it. You've got about 100 armed citizens showing up at a governor's office. Now, I'm not saying right, wrong, indifferent, whatever. I'm just saying if I was the governor of Kentucky, if I was Governor Andy, I'm going to freak out about that. I'm going to freak out.
Well, that seems reasonable. But I think this is sort of being amped up. I did hear something that there were going to be armed protest on the 17th somewhere. And later in this book stream, he starts talking about the fact that the power is going to go out. Well, there's the star.
It's insurrection invading the Presbycast.
Yeah, that's right. So we got to see a small child.
No, he wants to say hi. Say goodnight. Say
Oh,
goodnight.
yeah.
Good night.
Good night. Yes, that's I know his
Night,
name.
dude.
I won't say it
coup
online.
attempt.
Yeah, that's Sean's spawn, as it were.
That's my boy.
Yeah, he looks
Sean
good.
Spawn.
Yep.
And so there are rumors that there's going to be a big power outage, and there's all these generators in D.C. and there's 20,000 troops and all this stuff. And let me start with this.
Well, I
and see
think
if,
we should. Well, we should mention what you don't hear any talk of in DC is birds chirping. It's almost like they had all bird drones set to stealth that day, listening in on all the new 5G iPhone 12s in the crowd. So it really wasn't very hard for the government to figure out like exactly when all this was going on. They just had to, they just had to go to the birds. They probably even had the hit squads out there, which they call murders of crows. This is all from verified sources. I mean, I have screenshots and verified sources of all of this. Again, we should talk about the fact that, the whole reason coronavirus exists is so they could change the batteries in the birds. And birds were real up until September 10th. But on the 12th, that all changed.
Okay. Well, there's that.
Wow.
I think that the thing that is most disconcerting now, especially with what happened in D.C. last week, I don't know of any source of information that I trust. I don't trust the Alex Jones or QAnon crowd, but I don't trust any of the network news people or most print reporters to tell me what happened. And,
you can't trust an IFB pastor in Kentucky, though, apparently.
Well, no, he's entertaining, though. He has websites and screenshots. So, but
you're a source for news.
I don't know what happened last week or whose fault it was necessarily. There were a lot of things about it that were unusual. Some of the protesters appeared to be let in. There was the odd thing of how they normally stayed behind the velvet ropes. Most of them were acting like tourists, but certainly there were some instigators. And it's certainly not cool to break into the U.S. Capitol. I think that's a bad move generally.
I did hear this. I thought had some possibility to it. Was that after they'd clashed with the BLM/Antifa last time out in front of the gates, there was a thought that they would try to do more of a de-escalation type of opportunity with it, and so they weren't going to engage this crowd that way. Now, that doesn't explain all the pictures you see. It doesn't explain barricades being removed. It doesn't explain people not really fully suited in uniform. Sort of, they've got a badge and a vest, but then they've got tennis shoes and jeans on. I mean, there are some odd things that aren't quite explained yet. But I thought it was plausible that they decided, just for pure optics, they weren't going to do to meet them out in the street clash. They were going to try some form of de-escalation. You all saw what I saw. They let them in. A number of them got let in. They told them that they didn't agree. I think one guard said, "We don't agree with what you're doing, but you have a right to do it," or something like that. It seemed to run the gamut, right? From there's people there that were sinister, and there were people there that were caught up in it, and so it ran the gamut from sinister to tragic to comedic. I mean, you seem to have the whole group there. What it looked like to me.
In my news days, I covered a few, similar things, and you really don't know what's going on, and you don't know what's going to happen, and it has an unreal feel about it if you're in the middle of it, and probably if you're looking at it from the outside as well. I think we all agree that it's not good to become violent in these ways. But do we think it was an insurrection? I mean, I don't get the idea. I mean, it looked like, it looked like a prank or a stunt as much as anything, and it sort of had a short shelf life. I'm not saying it was good, but it had this weird. I mean, I guess people wanted to get their Instagram or their video they could post online. I don't know. It was very, very 2021.
It sort of had the what is the John Travolta in Pulp Fiction? Just the sort of looking around kind of meme to it of all right, we're here.
All right.
What do we do now?
If that was a coup, that's the lamest coup attempt in the history of the world.
Right. Yeah, it looked much more like a stunt, and like I said, they weren't expecting to have that sort of success. Didn't know
A bunch
to do
of
it.
basement dwellers wearing beaver pelts does not constitute a coup.
That's right.
If we're all supposed to be afraid of the orange man, that's the best he could do.
So I did read a thread from someone who was, they claimed to be an historian, but they said that they sort of infiltrated the crowd, and that there were a lot of people who were advocating violence and saying that Pence should be hung, and they had a gallows, fake gallows out front, replica gallows. Have
these people been to a Raiders game? There's way worse than that every Sunday.
Well, there is a little of that.
For the record, I have been to a Raiders game.
Well, as far as the sinister aspect, did anybody find out any more details about the guy who'd made the pipe bombs? The guy who had the van that was confiscated, or was a Bronco that was confiscated. I'd read he was from Alabama, but I didn't have any more information on him than that.
Well, I read today that they were at the Democratic and Republican party headquarters, and that they were real bombs, but nobody knows why they didn't go off.
I've heard rumors it was an IFB pastor from Kentucky, but that's just rumors.
Well,
or Alabama,
it sounds like an FBI opera,
well,
setup.
FBI
if they didn't go off.
and IFB is not that far off.
No.
Has the IFB infiltrated the FBI?
Let's hear if Brother Sluter has anything else that's helpful. He may just be rambling. Let's go back to Kentucky.
It's going to be some cause for concern if I'm in his position. Now, we're not talking about constitution. Is it their constitutional right? Sure. Is it? Is it? I agree with all that. Constitutional right to carry and bear arms. I'm in agreement with all that. I'm not saying what those people did are wrong at all. Okay, at all. I'm just saying from the governor's perspective. Yeah, that's, what's going on, especially after the events of last week. So our government is on high alert right now. 15,000 troops. I looked this up. I got confirmation of this. I looked this up. There were 20,000 troops that were landed in Iraq, or Afghanistan. Man, I cannot remember if it was Afghanistan or Iraq. I'm blanking out now. Afghanistan or Iraq. When we were trying to...
It was one of them, okay? So his point was 15,000 troops is a lot of troops.
These endless wars, who can keep them? Who can keep them right in their minds?
Yeah.
Either way, it's confirmed. You don't need the details. It's just confirmed.
Right. So do we think that D.C. is going to turn into a war zone, and Trump's going to try to hold on to his job?
No,
I don't.
I don't know.
It's going to be very boring.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope so. That's good. Boring government that accomplishes and does little. I think is a good thing, but that's not really the zeitgeist. So Trump, if the Trump experience is apparently almost over, what did he accomplish, if anything, aside from not starting any new wars and not expanding any that we were already in?
Well, he got a tax cut done, which put about $5,000 more in my pocket a year. That was significant to me. He didn't start any wars. He got farther than anybody I've known 40 years as far as peace in the Middle East or working toward it.
I mean, you can take a nonstop from Tel Aviv to Qatar now. I mean,
he did a fair amount of dereg and in the EPA. Those things that come to mind immediately.
It will continue to be interesting. I think all the, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett will get all of the publicity.
The judicial. Yeah.
But the transformation of the judicial from basically the circuit courts on down is going to be pretty incredible, because while Democrats were still screaming collusion on year 3.5, Mitch McConnell was still filing cloture on all those judges. So that's going to be a huge change.
Well, maybe the best thing Trump did or accomplished was that none of us should ever take the presidency as seriously as we used to. none of us should invest quite as much dignity and power into that office.
Could you
or
imagine?
place as much hope in it?
So, two things. I have 2 points, and then I'm going to try to remember my third, which is actually his greatest accomplishment. Oh, heck, I'll just spoil that one. His greatest accomplishment is the fact that CNN is closing down their airport television division.
I read that.
I've never been more excited to get on a plane in my entire life, knowing that I can walk by any screen and not see Anderson Cooper.
A woman.
What's that?
A woman.
Could you imagine?
Do you really want to get on a plane without the last person you see being Don Lemon?
Oh gosh, I hope so. One time I got on a plane and the first person I saw was Trey Gowdy. True story. But could you imagine, speaking of like journalists and everyone, and everyone saying, just how non-traumatic the last few days have felt since Trump got booted from Twitter. Could you imagine for a second having tweet notifications turned on for any political leader? Like, you want to be notified anytime the person says something. Like, we are not drawing stigma against people with mental illness, but that is a sign of a mental disorder if you're doing that, let alone feeling traumatized from it. And it inspired me to tweet the other day is like, I don't think people realize how easy it is to avoid what world leaders say online. It is remarkably simple. You don't follow them. You turn off retweets from anyone who does, and you won't see it. Like, you'll go weeks without knowing what these people are saying. It's wonderful.
Well, I turned off all Twitter notifications a few months ago, so I have to go look for it if I'm going to know about it. And that's a good thing. There's no reason to be notified of someone liking your tweet while you're having supper.
I really feel sorry for all the people with Trump derangement syndrome, because they're going to go through withdrawal in a couple of weeks when they don't have Orange Man to dominate their lives. What are they going to do?
Well, CNN is going to fail. They don't have anything to run through their news cycle anymore. They're going to have to invent it. But the thought was before, the only reason they stayed afloat was because of Trump, and the thought is they'll sell there shortly.
We've sort of got a little bit of a foretaste of it with the Kamala Harris magazine cover kerfuffle. Is quite simply, that's what they're going to talk about, is she was supposed to wear blue, and they changed it.
Well, did they have multiple shots of her? Is that in different clothes, and that's the one they went with? Is that how that came out?
Yeah, so the idea was...
No, we lost Resby for a second.
Am I back? See, I started. The drones knew. The drones knew. Essentially, they had agreed upon a photo, and then the one they went with was one of them that they had not even authorized or was not even in the discussion. So I actually sort of respect the move, because you should always troll your politicians. Always, always, always. If you tell them you're bringing steak so that they bring red wine, you should bring fish so that they're caught with the wrong wine. You should never let them feel comfortable.
Gavin's got a whole case in his trunk, so he's always prepared.
Yeah.
Got a whole winery.
It's the old French laundry app.
Let's talk about the religious language that was used around the whole Capitol attack, if you will. Again, it was not a good thing. It was a dangerous situation. Anytime no one's in control, it's dangerous. It's great that there were no weapons or bombs or anything like that. But there was the Capitol was spoken of as a temple of democracy that was desecrated. I thought that was a little creepy. So
cringy.
Did you all have similar reactions?
Well, I agree that it is a religious site, except that it's a synagogue of Satan. Only evil and false religion comes out of those hallowed halls. So to think that it was desecrated is rather absurd. And I don't understand when we're a country that's founded on systematic racism. The Capitol was built by slaves, but yet if a bunch of hillbillies wearing beaver pelts step foot in there, now it's desecrated. Which is it? You can't have both at the same time.
Well, and there's also the idea that, well, you know what? I lost my train of thought. I do that all the time.
Well, actually, I thought it was hard. I think the left has largely regarded politics as their religion. They're seeking to get all of life contained within politics, which is just lousy. But they're just committed to it. So that part of it made sense. I believe that they see it that way.
Well, I think what I meant to say was the irony is that the ethics of Capitol Hill are the ethics of a brothel. Because there's just a lot of money changing hands, and it's all about self-interest typically.
Sure.
So that's a little. And I don't have to agree with you, but if you say something that you don't believe and that isn't true, which is anybody who deifies Congress, either they don't know anything about it, or they're just gaslighting you. They're blowing smoke, and that rubs me the wrong way. Now, when I was in the news business, I was around a lot of these guys. I even did some work for some. And the stories you hear, they're pretty much true. It's like a meat market. So which I guess is what old pagan temples sort of were in a way, and they also had their temple prostitutes and all that sort of thing. But don't tell me it's a sacred temple. It's an important national symbol, and it shouldn't be ransacked. Neither should it be deified.
Well, it could be a sacred temple in that, a Greek sort of way. In that regard.
Corinth.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, we agree, Romans 13, that God ordains and installs our leaders. However, as, Reformed folk and Calvinists, we also believe he did that with Bozo the Clown and John Rocker. And any number of people that we've laughed at, they were all ordained and installed in those positions predeterminedly. So, I love this week because it's basically proved everything I've said about architecture correct. Is that if you make your temple not look like a temple, no one wants to go. These should be concrete, square, windowless bunkers. There is no reason that anyone should ever want to go in there, and there should be even less reason that anyone should want to hold the offices therein. These are not noble people, and these are not noble positions. And usually the motives are elsewhere. And I loved Joe Silverman 7, who's kind of goes by Joe Pilot MD on Twitter. I said that I wanted this tweet injected into my veins as a third vaccine. Quote, take away the majesty of their meeting place and maybe they'll start acting more like normal people. Make them meet in Grand Forks and Springfield, and maybe they won't want to stay there all year ruining our lives and our country. It's just a legislature. We don't have lords. End tweet. I already have my appointment to tattoo that on my chest. So.
Well, just don't show it to us. That's all we ask. Keep that one to yourself.
GA hotel rooms, less than a week.
I was going to say, to the next hotel room share. Yeah.
I won't tell you what the code name for that operation was, but it was successful. All right. So, any more on the events of last week and what you think is going to happen between now and the 20th?
Is it really the 20th? Can't we just do it tomorrow?
So would that be on a Wednesday or Thursday?
It's usually a Tuesday, isn't it?
Okay. Well,
I guess it would be a Wednesday.
Yeah, because today's the 12th, and the 20th is the date, I think. So I don't know.
Look it up.
I just hope Biden lives long enough.
He's going to face some challenges, no doubt.
The 20th is a Wednesday, by the way.
All right, so Dan, let me share this with you. I saw today online someone saying that they hoped there would be church discipline, and I think this was a PCA pastor, that he was looking forward to the church discipline of people who went to the rally last week. Or the protest.
I don't think fundamental Baptists practice church discipline, do they?
No, this was a PCA guy. This was a PCA guy.
Well, if there are PCA people going there, maybe.
I don't see that.
So it's the whole Q thing, and the people who I have people park outside my office, and they've got a 1999 Dodge Caravan, but they spent $100 having a decal cut where this is custom. They've written something about Trump, like a whole paragraph, and they put it on the side windows or the back window. I mean, there are people who've spent a lot of money and put a lot of effort into their Trump swag. So there really are people who have this weird, almost religious conception of Trump. But is it overrated? Are people like David French and some of the hand wringers just absolutely blowing this out of proportion, or is the Christian church going to be wrecked by people who say they're Christians but they really worship Donald Trump?
Wait,
well, I
are
think
you
it's
saying
clear that
some people say they're Christians but then act like they're not? I mean, is that a confirmed, verified fact? That would be shocking.
I've heard that it happens.
one confirmed verified fact is the ghostwriters of the Left Behind series are now working for QAnon. All the things that ended up on the cutting room floor of Left Behind have been espoused by QAnon.
That's the part that's hard to tell. And you guys may be more familiar than I am, but I just don't traffic in evangelical circles anymore. I mean, if I walked over to Cornerstone and John Hagee, I might go, yeah, this is all about Trump. It's all the culture war, and you kill that, and it's gone. But I don't. Gosh, in the religious circles I'm in, I don't see it. But maybe it's true in evangelicalism or in Southern Baptist or IBF and IFB. What is it?
FBI.
FBI, right? Maybe there's some sense of it. I've got friends who have got relatives who are, basically dyed-in-the-wool primitive Baptist types who they swear this is their religion, and this is what turned them against Trump was their relatives and their religious fervor and commitment to him. But I'm just not in those circles, so I don't know. I don't know any of them.
Well, there's a lot of course, we can sort of make fun of people, but there's a complete lack of curiosity or empathy for people who are subject to this. It's not the liberal Trump derangement syndrome, but have the Democrats, for instance, asked themselves, why did we lose to the worst candidate in the history of U.S. politics once and nearly lose a second time? And why are people so committed to this? I mean, what degree of estrangement from the mainstream of American culture, from the cities, from the class, the upper classes and the media?
We should mention that without the Georgia runoff system, they would have, those Senate races, would have been very different as well if they didn't go to a runoff. I mean,
right?
At least one of them was going to go for Republicans.
Yeah. So everybody was interested in that book Hillbilly Elegy a couple of years ago. But,
nobody read it apparently.
But there's no curiosity about why are the deplorables the way they are.
Yeah.
And why can't I understand them at all? Now
that's what many are failing to realize is that Trump was not the origin of this. He was just the one that they latched onto, and it's not going to end with Trump. They can remove the orange man, but this spirit is still going to continue.
Yeah, our great divide in this country isn't race, it's class. You now have an aristocratic class who are completely divorced from how the rest of the country lives, and they've Wendell Berry did this well in regards to Kentucky. Kentucky is no more than a waste dump for New York City at this point. That's the role that Kentucky gets to play in the greater fabric of the country, and those people are hostile about it. And if it's not going to be Trump, it's going to be somebody else. They're going to find somebody to latch on. I mean, this is deep seated.
And the next guy is going to be a lot worse because Trump was a buffoon. The next guy will be powerful and calculated and skillful, unlike Trump.
Well, and I worry with all the, with the banning from social media and the censorship and the mainstream media, and it's going to radicalize more people, I think.
Well, we got the domestic war on terror now, and if it's as successful as the first war on terror, we could all be looking happy in the days to come. Certainly, we won't radicalize anybody in the domestic war because that never happened in the other war on terror.
Right.
It feels like they're going to send out the domestic war on terror soldiers, and it's just going to be a whole bunch of stormtroopers from Star Wars. So everything they shoot at, they just miss. And
why not just use social workers? I mean, why not use college sociology majors?
But here's your problem with what they want to do. If they're going to, if they say they really want to crack down, how much of law enforcement's actually going to go along with it? You'll get some, but you'll get quite a bit of law enforcement who's going to go, and we're not doing it. It's not dissimilar to the joke SNL made about living in the Brooklyn bubble. Everything was great in the bubble, except they were having a hard time finding firemen and cops, and so they were soliciting for them. And the elite are going to have the same problem here. You might be able to send Metro Health, food inspectors out and that sort of, but we're trying to get your rank and file law enforcement, after the way they've been treated, now carry out what they consider unconstitutional edicts against the general populace. Good luck.
But doesn't COVID tell us that more cops than we might have expected have cooperated and have carried out the edicts?
I guess it depends where you are. Sure, there's been some of those shots in New York City, but also in New York State, you've had a number of sheriff's office who told them, we're not doing it.
Yeah, and in the UK, it's really been chilling the way the police have been on board with the lockdown measures, even the worst of them. So that's. I think that's again. It depends on where you are, but yeah.
But isn't that more of the hypocrisy too of what we saw this past week? So we can't have guns and we can't have a border, and we're bigots and racist and xenophobic for both those desires. Yet they're now going to increase security at the Capitol. Can't believe it got breached. They want their guys with guns, and they'd like a wall now built around the Capitol building. So it's very, and that's what the problem is. The hypocrisy is for everybody to see. And you can be a buffoon and you can be a redneck, and you can look at that and figure out in about 5 minutes, oh, okay. So what's good for the goose is not good for the gander. I get it. And that's what they've done, whether it was Gavin Newsom going to French Laundry or Pelosi getting her hair done, or the mayor of Chicago deciding, she really needed a haircut and was tired of it, and, join the crowd.
The problem is that the conservatives don't realize that the left doesn't care about hypocrisy. They don't care about being hypocritical. No, so calling all these guys on Twitter, look at what they're doing, they don't care. So pointing that out is meaningless.
But it's not meaningless as far as explaining those 75 million people aren't going anywhere. You're going to have a contingent of the electorate that's going to sit there and go, excuse my French, but screw you. We're not changing. You may force us underground. You may take us off of popular media platforms, but all you're doing is polarizing them even more. You're bringing a solidarity of groups that you claim to not have wanted. You're forcing people to tribe up.
Yeah, and as Christians, what we want is to have the freedom to worship and do what we ought to do, but to be largely left alone. And there's a great desire for revenge on anyone who is even seen to have supported Trump and they're talking about canceling people, firing people, canceling advertising for anybody associated with with Trump in general. And I think that's a bad precedent. But to be fair, the right has used boycott and threats of similar threats in their culture war. We're getting some of us. I think Christians and conservatives are gonna get a culture war turned on them. Now, some people would say we've had it before, but we've really been left alone largely. That may change and that may be done. So, Dan, as a pastor, what do you tell your people? Now, I know you're not preaching about politics, but what are the general principles that, pilgrims and strangers in a country that's maybe not quite as, if not friendly, not as indifferent to them as it used to be?
Well, from the pulpit, I tell them don't fear. So I'm preaching through the Heidelberg Catechism this year, and Lord's Day 1, what is your only comfort in life and in death? And so the first Lord's Day of this year, I preached that, and a strong message of don't fear. Now, I didn't mention COVID. I didn't mention politics at all, but the message was don't fear because we're safe in Christ. So that's preeminent, and that's from the pulpit. Now, I have spoken to our consistory and said that we need to prepare long-term to live as Christians in China. It might not come to be that way here. I hope it doesn't, but we need to be prepared for it and not taken off guard. And just like in China, I foresee Christians in the United States as cooperating with the state. They're not going to outlaw Christianity. China hasn't outlawed Christianity. It's perfectly legal if you go to the state-sponsored church. And I think we've already seen many evangelicals happy to conform to the culture even before the state put its boot on your neck. So once the state pressure comes, many will capitulate to that and become court evangelicals. And so then we'll have to become underground house church Christians, just like our brothers and sisters in China. And obviously it's not ideal. Nobody wants that, but the church is flourishing in China. We don't even know how many Christians there are in house churches, well over 1 million. So it's not going to be easy or pleasant, but the church will survive even if individual Christians won't.
Well, that's a good word. It's a sobering word, but we appreciate that. There are probably more conservative Presbyterians in China than there are in the U.S. But the problem is ecclesially. What you do find you found it in Korea and in China. What has a hard time? Presbyterianism has a hard time functioning properly when 3/4 of the men are killed off, or when people can't really be connected to one another. There's a tendency to clericalism, to strong men, or maybe domination, like in Korea, where women became incredibly powerful in a sort of informal way in the church. So it'd be great to have enough freedom to operate as Presbyterians and order churches properly, but that may not be what's in our future. I would direct people back to the sort of dark spoof episode we did a few months ago about a time travel dispatch from 2025 or whatever it was, and it's been eerily prophetic. But those that haven't listened to it, go back to find the time capsule episode. So things could be much better than we expect, and they'll probably be better than we deserve, especially as a nation. I don't think we'll get what we deserve, but that's not our only citizenship, thankfully. Well, anything else on these subjects before we go on to a very important article that was released today?
Yeah, I just think that the church should not despair. The church should not be vindictive, seeking retribution against Trump, or despairing the new administration. We need to place our hope in Christ. Again, not fear what may be coming for us, and trust in the sovereignty of God. It's not a time to despair. It's a time for great hope and clinging to the means of grace. This should sober us to the reality that we need that, give us a greater confidence in the means of grace, how much we need it.
Yeah, and this comes at a time, though, when many people have been kept from the means of grace, or at least in the normal person, face-to-face way. So we shouldn't discount the amount of stress that some people are under, and some churches are under. I mean, churches have grown in this, but there's not any church that hasn't suffered in some way as a result of what's happened in the last year. And we don't really need increased stress from government in the future. So what I think some of us have been concerned about some of the woke Christianity issues for years, since 2014, 2015, and with all the problems we normally have, I think injecting identity politics in, which we've seen graphically in political. A lot of people didn't know it existed until about the last year or so, but anyone paying attention knows it goes back further than that. And Carl Trueman had an article in First Things today. I think it will prove to be a milestone in this debate about critical race theory and what we would call woke Christianity. And let me clear the screen a bit here. This article is called Evangelicals and Race Theory, and it has to do with CRT, which stands for Critical Race Theory. And let's just, I assume everyone read this today?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So
Even I did.
I'm sure Dan's heard Carl speak in person. Anyone else? Well, he's an incredibly bright guy, and sometimes if you hear Carl speak, as I have in person a couple of times, he doesn't even really. Sometimes it's like he doesn't have a script or anything. He just tells you what he's been thinking about, and because he thinks at such a higher level than most of us, it's just interesting to hear him talk about what he's thinking about. But he put a little work into this piece, and he has waded into the waters of the controversy over critical race theory in the church. And we know that it's been it really started in the PCA, in my mind, back in 2014 and 15. And it sort of hit the Southern Baptist Convention in the last couple of years. And of course, anything is going to be bigger and weirder and more intense in the Southern Baptist Convention. We've sort of kept it at a low boil in the PCA, but in the SBC, it all goes up to 11, and they have the same sort of racial history that the Southern Presbyterian denominations, most of them do. So CRT, critical race theory, he has waded in, and this is probably the most sort of careful, erudite treatment of this we've had from a major figure. Most of the major figures in evangelicalism are silent or maybe somewhat positive on some of these things, or at least agnostic. But Trueman didn't mince any words, and let me look at the first paragraph, and then we'll skip down a bit. Critical race theory, promoted by progressive activists and adopted by many evangelical intellectuals, maybe not a misnomer, has become the shibboleth. Are you for it? Are you against it? A movement already strained to the breaking point by the Trump presidency, that is evangelicalism, now faces the very real possibility of coming apart over race. So, Dan, is he overstating the case, saying that evangelicalism, we don't really consider ourselves to be evangelicals, but we can't help but be affected by evangelicalism? Are churches, denominations, movements going to be split over race in the next few years?
I don't know if they'll be split so much 50-50, if that's how we're defining split, but I think they will be fractured. I think it's already happening. He references some SBC churches that have already left their denominations. I think as this expands more and more within evangelical and even NAPARC denominations, there's going to be more opposition to it, and we will see some fracturing.
All right, so in the SBC, there were some high-profile defections. I'll note that those who left had not been a part of the SBC for long. One of them had sort of been a dual member of the SBC and the Progressive. There's a black denomination called the Progressive Baptists, and when you get in the SBC, there's money for some things, and those who left have not been those who've been there forever. And make of that what you will. There seems to be a lot of naivete about these things. We all know people that think, well, because I care about this issue and because it's important, the church should be involved in it. And some people think that because this is important to me, everyone at church ought to understand and go along. That's really not the way it's going to work. I think some of us fear that introducing these things into church discourse, especially when you use very worldly methodologies and even ideologies that have a Marxist origin, it can't turn out well, and I think that's what we're seeing right now.
Well, and I think there's a number of us in the church, and we've gone through this to some degree already in the PCA, but I'm not particularly interested in my pastor's view of politics, particularly from the pulpit. I mean, he and I can go have a coffee and talk about it, but outside of that, I don't have really much interest. I figure most of the time I'm better at it than they are anyway. So I don't really care. I don't know what his opinion is about it. In the PCA, we've already seen the splinter. So we've talked about this at length, but this is how it started with the race and rec paper. And you've got Presbyterians I've been out for a year and a half, I guess, from the PCA. But you had Presbyterians split down the middle. And the thought was you'd end up with progressive presbyteries and you'd end up with conservative presbyteries. And they're largely going to be split along this urban-rural line, or along, and maybe even more specific within the PCA, along Redeemer franchise type of churches and other type of churches within the PCA. They're going to split right down those lines.
This paragraph is important. Let me read it. It's short, and you'll see where Truman's going. Critical race theory, like other critical theories, including post-colonialism or queer theory, for example, is self-certifying. Its basic claims, for example, that racism is systemic or that being non-racist is impossible, are not conclusions drawn from arguments. They are axioms, and they cannot be challenged by those who do not agree with them. Those who dissent or offer criticism are, by definition, part of the problem. That's a good way of structuring an argument if you can get away with it. But I think it should be obvious why this can rub people the wrong way. One of the things that I've noted, and I guess I probably first heard it from Michelle Higgins way back when, she was very casually would refer to people as being white supremacists. That term has been redefined in the last several years. A white supremacist used to be a guy with a skinhead or a Nazi, and now it's practically everyone. And I think anyone should expect pushback when things are redefined, especially in an inflammatory way like that. We're apparently we're supposed to appreciate and adopt the academic definitions of these things, which, by the way, they change every 2 or 3 years too.
She had defined it pretty much. If you're white, you're suffering from some level of white privilege and blindness to your white privilege, which you needed her or others to inform you of. And it wasn't a discussion. They were there to lecture you about it and to tell you about it, and your job was to sit there and take it. I mean, that is not an exaggeration of how Michelle Higgins presented that and presented her white privilege classes in the PCA.
Yeah, and she's no longer in the PCA. I should note that.
Yeah.
I looked at that paragraph too, Chortles, and thought that it was central to the article and explaining the issue very well. And it points out there's no room for dialogue here. This is not a conversation. It's either submit or you'll be forced to submit. There's no exchange. Many will say we just want a seat at the table. I don't really see that. I see them flipping over the table with CRT. And then he quotes Christina Edmondson later on in the article and says that white Christianity's very design exists to maintain false piety and sear the consciences of white people against the oppression and exploitation of blacks. Why would you want to be in a church together with people who have designed Christianity to maintain false piety? I don't understand. What are we trying to get here? What's the goal? If we're going to be in the same communion, why would you want to be at the supper, partaking of the same loaf, drinking from the same cup of people who have designed Christianity to maintain their false piety of racism?
Yeah, why would you say it like that? Even if you believe that to some degree, why would you say it like that and expect that it would be received by any reasonable human? It seems like an odd tactic.
But that's the pushback, right? The minute you give pushback, it's proof of your racism. I mean, that's the cleverness of the whole argument. The minute you resist, you're racist. That just proved it.
Let me say this. Some of the, Dan, you talked about turning tables over. In politics, that's okay, I think. I mean, I think there's a place for that sort of approach and for being bombastic. And, I mean, politics is about, it's about power. Somebody's got to win. But in the church, that's a different story. It doesn't work for me in the church. An approach that's that aggressive and that's that accusatory. It just generally does not work in the church. Next paragraph talks about the fact that a lot more minorities supported Trump this time than they did 4 years ago, but that's not seen to be evidence that those who are who hold these progressive theories that they're wrong. It's evidence of false consciousness, which is something that he quotes Mao Zedong, who had used the same logic, and the Marxists used this to explain why people in Germany became Nazis rather than communists, I don't think I want those paradigms being used to explain things in the church. And so he's got a paragraph about Chairman Mao's infamous circular from 1966 had to do with the Cultural Revolution, and he made the point that if you change the word bourgeois to white and class to race, you have exactly the argument and logic of CRT, critical race theory. So I don't know. There's a comfort level with things Marxist leftist, academic, sort of Northern European theories today that I'm frankly uncomfortable with with the level of comfort that we have for some of these things in the church.
And
Well,
I
and it
think
really is a hermeneutic. It's not just a political philosophy. It's a hermeneutic, and they take that Marxist hermeneutic and they read scripture through that lens, and that's where it's really dangerous. Reading 19th century ideas of class warfare back into the New Testament, not only is it bad scholarship, but it's extremely dangerous.
It's
Well,
this
and it's been
interesting
done
thing, like the
before,
same
right,
people
Dan?
who,
I mean, this is
all the people who say they don't want, like, Americanism read into the Bible are now reading Americanism directly into the Bible. Sean.
well, and those of us who came out of the Roman Catholic tradition, we've seen this before. This is liberation theology. It's the oppressed and the oppressor. And in the scripture's case, it was the state and the Judaizers and the Jews who were oppressing, and Jesus was there to liberate them. This is the whole thrust of the Jesuit movement in Latin America, was this idea of the oppressed and the oppressed and the oppressor, and they were there on the side of the oppressed to free them from it. And Jesus was a liberator. He was a political liberator. So this isn't even new. It's not unique. We've seen this played out, and we've seen it played out, quite frankly, at a higher scholarship level than these guys are trying to do it currently. But it's old hat. We've done this before. We've gone down this road. We know how it ends.
You're right, Sean. And it was directly wedded to the Marxist rebels in South America. I don't think we'll see it as tightly connected maybe to political Marxists here in the States, but definitely in South America, they were walking hand in hand with the guerrillas,
That's right.
the Marxists overthrowing governments.
Right.
And Pope Francis came out of that whole milieu.
He came right out of that, right? And actually, Francis was criticized. His big criticism of Francis out of his group was that they felt he'd abandoned the more bloodthirsty Jesuits who'd actually taken up arms along with the quote-unquote oppressed, and they felt that Francis had betrayed them.
All right, let me read this paragraph. It's short. Critical race theory rests on simple therapeutic premises. It leaves no room for argument or doubt. For all its sophisticated language, CRT portrays life as a zero-sum game. Some people do not have power. They struggle and do not flourish. This happens because somebody else has seized power from them and oppresses them in an ongoing and unrelenting way. The oppression has solidified into a self-justifying system. There is a comprehensive explanation for all the evils we suffer. You know what this is? This is a conspiracy theory. It's a comprehensive theory, like QAnon, that explains everything I don't like about Hollywood and politicians,
Right.
and world government and the elite and Jeffrey Epstein and everything. It's a conspiracy theory in the sense that it's an overarching narrative that you can't really prove, but it offers a satisfying explanation for many or all of the ills that we see in society.
I think you're right, Chortles, and it's even grander than a conspiracy theory in that this is universal and it's for all time. It's not just an isolated conspiracy. This is how you read every interaction in all of human history, the oppressed and the oppressor. Marxism is universal, not limited by time, not limited by geography, the most all-encompassing conspiracy theory ever.
And all in the meantime, true Presbyterianism, sits untried in the corner, as usual.
True Presbyterianism. I am going to say this. There's an aspect of this that could have been built up, if they'd have been able to divorce it from race and divorce it from the Marxist underpinnings. And the area where they could have built this up and it would have had some legitimacy was that in the American scene, Protestantism was often elite. So the idea that the Protestant church in America was extremely waspy, right? They held the cultural institutions, they held the money, and it was not a very blue collar place. If they'd have built this out of that impulse, you could have had something there that would have tied into Presbyterianism really well when you look back with the Scots versus the English and the Church of England. It's very much the same situation. There should be a blue collar sense to our denominations. Daryl Hart talked about it as we're all mutts. And I wish that was more true. I wish there was more of that sense of we're all blue collar. We're not a privileged group in that regard. And you do have lots of pockets of Protestantism in America that was elitist and that was very off-putting to people. And that part I have sympathy with. I have sympathy with it in regards to the PCA and not being a Southerner and not coming from a prominent family name. And yet that sort of who's your family, where do you come from, is very much evident within the PCA. So if they'd have gone that route, if they'd have developed it out that way, rather than having it tied to Marxism, they could have had something to have a conversation about.
I think you're right, Sean, in that the Presbyterians and the Episcopals in the United States were definitely more of the educated class, upper class, but the Methodists and Southern Baptists overall were generally pretty working class in the 19th century. So I think there is a blue collar spirit in some of these denominations, class wise, but then incorporating the various races in these denominations has always been a hurdle that most have not been able to climb over.
Well, and it's been tough because being in the PCA, I would talk to people, from Jackson, Mississippi, from the Panhandle in Florida, from places in Alabama, and there was an issue with race there. There was very much a sense. I knew pastors who had gone to be interviewed for a pastorate in Indiana or in Mississippi, I think were the two that I knew of. And it came up. Are you going to be opening to having Black folk worship with us? And both those cases, the pastor said, well, of course, if we're preaching the gospel, it's open to all people, all cultures. And they didn't get the call as a result of that. So there is a real heritage in aspects of the South and others where race was an issue. But and there needs to be a discussion about it, and there needs to have been some reform about it. But that's not the tack that these people took. The tack that they took was the oppressor and the oppressed. We're not here to have a discussion. We're here to, just like you mentioned, we're here to turn the tables over. This is changing. Y'all can either be allies of this or you can be the enemy. You choose.
Yeah, Truman, being from England and coming from a leftier, really political background than a lot of us would be maybe even comfortable with, while he noted, I have it highlighted there, that the racial problems in America are real. Unlike some people from the United Kingdom, he's not looking down his nose and scolding the American church in the way that a lot are tempted to do, in a way that a lot of, Native Americans, real Americans are all too happy to throw most Christians under the bus as unenlightened, probably unregenerate, just horrible people. So we do recognize that there's a real problem, but
one thing
it's the solution that we have a little problem with.
Right.
One thing that disappoints me is that in the alleged discussion about racial issues in the church, it seems to be limited to black and white. We rarely mention Hispanics or Asians, which is forefront in my mind because Torrance, California, is right down the road from where some of the Japanese internment camps were during the Second World War. And there were many Japanese Americans rounded up in this area and locked into concentration camps. That was not that long ago. Some of those people are still alive. And we have Japanese American members of our congregation. We come to the table together. We eat from the same loaf. We drink from the same cup. They don't see this as white Christianity, the same Christianity that interred their family members during the war. This is Catholic Christianity. So if we're going to expand the racial conversation, I wish that it would go to other ethnic groups rather than just the black and white issue.
Yeah, and there is the issue. I mean, how many rural redneck churches has the PCA planted in the last year? I mean, there's some effort at that, even in my own presbytery, but there's no. It's amazing that we seem to be called to serve the well-educated, artistic types who live downtown. Apparently, that's where the Macedonian call is coming from these days. All the while, our country has all the problems that we've been speaking of, and the very problems that have, led some people to make a savior of Donald Trump today, and who knows what or who tomorrow. So,
well, and I think Truman talks about this too. And it's what we're talking about here, and Dan's talking about. Well, we need to expand it beyond black and white. It's a complex issue, and this approach says it's not. It says there's no nuance to it. It is literally black and white. You're either on this side or you're on the other side, and that's not the reality of our race relations in this country. It's not the reality of our race relations in our churches. It's complex. There's all sorts of reasons and nuance to this conversation, which this group of people don't let you have. You can't have the discussion. And so it never goes anywhere. You can't have it. You're not allowed to introduce complexity, because all your complexity does is your way of reintroducing your whiteness to the conversation. That's you introducing the complexity is again part of your culpability. It's just an example of your whiteness.
Well, and Truman makes the point that the problem with the conversation is that it's not happening because most, his assertion is that Christianity Today, the Gospel Coalition, the leadership of seminaries, they've signed up with one side, and it's not seemed to be respectable to say some of the things, as you were saying, Sean. It's just not happening. We're bending over backwards to one way of doing this and one side here, and so he blames the evangelical gatekeepers like Christianity Today, the Gospel Coalition, and he mentioned someone else. Now I'm gonna take credit for something here. This part of the article refers to Christina Edmondson, who is the wife of a pastor who used to be in the OPC, now in the PCA. And in the original draft of this article, her name was spelled wrong. It was spelled with a U rather than an O there, an Edmondson. And I messaged someone and said, you better fix that or you're really going to get roasted. So I guess they got to someone, and that was cleaned up and edited. So it is important to spell people's names right. You don't want to give offense for
I think that's the part of
no good reason.
Part of the article where Truman talks about the idea of privilege. It's pretty privileged to get your voice heard at Christianity Today, the New York Times, and HBO, and your contrary voices can't be heard. They get deplatformed. So if you want, that's a pretty privileged position. Not a lot of us get published in the New York Times or in Christianity Today, for that matter.
Yeah, and again, some of the people like Jamar Tisby, they can get articles in the New York Times or the Washington Post about whenever they want it. It seems that the liberal mainstream news media loves articles from evangelicals who are bashing evangelicals, and especially if there's a helpful political dimension to it, and there certainly has been in the Trump era. So yes, that's and our friend Darrell, his heart has made a lot of. He talks about the importance of institutions, and how institutions have always been important to conservative Protestantism, confessional Protestantism, and we don't have that many, and the institutions that are there are moving to the left and favor one point of view. And of course, like as you said, the New York Times, Christianity Today, or even the Gospel Coalition. Now,
and you can understand why they take those positions. Christianity Today doesn't want to be canceled for being a white supremacist rag if they run an opposition piece. And that's exactly what would happen. So it is about surviving, and it's about money. They would be out of business if they ran oppositional articles in Christianity Today and Gospel Coalition.
Well, so Truman uses him. He describes critical theory as Marxist, and he uses the image of a jockey and a horse. Now that may get him in trouble too, but let me find that, because there's more than one of those here in the article. Let me. All right, so let me go back up in the article a bit. Eric Fromm and company thought in terms of class and economics. Ibram X. Kendi, who is a contemporary left-wing anti-racist figure, best-selling author, Kendi and his allies think in terms of race and discourses of power, but the postmodern twist does not change the basic logic. As a former colleague used to quip, same horse, different jockey. So he's comparing European Marxist thought to contemporary critical theory. Critical race theory is the Marxist horse ridden by the jockey of identity politics rather than the jockey of class warfare. That goes back to what you had said earlier, Sean, and that explains the closing paragraph of the article, because he goes back to the horse jockey rider image. Let me read that, and we'll sort of wrap up our discussion talking about what he asserts in this last paragraph. Evangelical leaders need to count the cost of letting rhetorical assertions of the sort made by Edmondson, which is basically that Christianity is, as we know it in this country, Christianity is set up and designed to preserve white supremacy. So he says rhetorical assertions of that sort and others go unchallenged. As the conceits of systemic evil, false consciousness, and hegemonic discourse are legitimated, we must prepare for other critical theories to use them against Orthodox Christians. Consider this formulation, and he quotes, and in quotes, straight cisgendered Christianity exists to maintain false piety and sear the consciences of straight cisgendered people against the oppression and exploitation of queer and trans people. So he's changed white and black to gay and straight, and then he concludes this way. And we know that Truman's written a lot about identity and these issues. The next jockey may wear a rainbow shirt instead of one with a BLM logo. He'll be riding the same horse, that is, Marxist doctrine, It seems that some of the most influential institutions in American evangelicalism have already bet on him to win. Now, I would say the question about what happens when homosexuals use this ideology, that's not theoretical. That's actually been done. If you followed Revoice, these exact arguments are used. The same logic, intersectionality is real. And from the first time I heard Michelle Higgins speak, she was and this was on a video, of course. She was mentioning LGBT, queer, trans people. There's a type of woke person who doesn't stop at race, because the most oppressed person in the world is a minority who's also a sexual minority. But I think where this movement may hit the rocks is not everyone's going to go there on the gender and sexual identity thing. But reactions to Truman's insightful comments and maybe inflammatory comments about critical theory and what it holds for the future.
No, you're right, Chortles. The LGBTQ agenda comes riding right behind the BLM agenda. Even the doctrine page of Black Lives Matter website promotes LGBTQ issues alongside of the racial issues. Black Lives Matter even had a Black Trans Lives Matter protest last summer. So you can't escape these. If you embrace one, you have to embrace all of it. That's by design. Marxism does not segment. You have to swallow the whole pill. And so evangelicals who think that they can go there for the racial stuff and embrace CRT for those areas, for critical race theory, you have to embrace it for all forms of critical theory. It's going to come right behind it, and you can't stop it.
It reminds me of a story I heard when I was in the news business. There was a family that had a real Christmas tree, and after Christmas they needed to dispose of it, so they took all the decorations off, and they had a fireplace, and they had a fire in the fireplace. And their idea was, we'll just feed the Christmas tree, the dry Christmas tree, into the fireplace, and as it burns, we'll keep pushing it in, and we'll dispose of it in that way. Well, you can imagine what happened. It exploded like a
fixes or cable,
like a napalm bomb, and burned the house down. So I think that's my concern, that you can't just do a little bit of critical theory, Marxist thinking, struggle. If you view everything in terms of struggle, you're going to get more struggle than you bargained for.
And just going back to my point earlier about why I'm confused as to why they would want to be part of a church founded and designed to promote white supremacy. I'm not trying to become a member of the Black Hebrew Israelites, a systemically racist organization that hates people like me. That's fine. They can hate me. I'm not going to hang out with them. I don't understand, if you think that about the white church, why would you want to be involved with these people?
Well, it almost makes you wonder if they really believe everything that they say. If it's this bad, I mean, there's a lot of hyperbole, but hyperbole is not helpful. And I think that's one of the benefits of this article is it shows how much hyperbole there is. And I think when you have to resort to highly hyperbolic and emotional arguments, it brings your argument into question, I think.
Well, I don't know. We got exposed to these people in the PCA via the Race and Reconciliation paper and stuff, and so I don't know any of them personally. I do know that to some have commented on it, and dealing with it is in answer to Dan's question, why do they want to be here? And it's retributive on their part. It's punitive. It's a bit of it's depending on how far you want to read into motives or how much they understand. There's quite a bit of vengeance involved in this philosophy. There's quite a bit of get even. I'm going to take what's yours, like you took what was mine. It's not much of a Christian ethic, but it certainly is exhibited itself in the political sphere that way.
That's a Marxist ethic.
Yeah.
Well, and there are minorities in the PCA and other denominations who are happy to be there, and don't adopt these. I mean, this is not universal. It's not. It's
Sure.
not. But this may rub us the wrong way. But imagine how difficult it makes it for someone who's a minority who does not embrace this. I mean, they're going to be looked at. It's going to make it harder for them to relate to the majority population, but they're going to be at odds with the more radical elements, which are often, this is not white versus black or minority versus majority. It's just two different ideologies at work here. I mean, we have a lot of woke, middle-aged white guys, or some of them are younger, recent college graduates, but they have the luxury of picking this up and laying it down. But the problems it can make for just a black family who loves Reformed theology, and they've come to a NAPARC church. I think this creates more problems for them than it does for any of us. And
it's just like he said with the Trump supporters at the opening of the article, that doesn't explain anything, but that the oppressed are just dopes. They've been deceived so long, they've been oppressed so long that they embrace their oppressor. And I'm sure that black family that loves Reformed theology and is not espousing critical race theory, well, you're just duped into white supremacy. We need to enlighten you.
Well, in an older time, they just would have called them Uncle Toms.
Well, there are people that get called that now. I mean, some people. Daryl Harrison works for John MacArthur now, but he told us. I've heard about the things he's been called. We had the rapper K-Dub True on the podcast, and he's experienced the same thing. And it would be really nice if nobody was treated that badly for any reason, for racial or otherwise. So that's just it's not right, not helpful. So
and since we're a bunch of four white guys here, I do want to recommend. There's a good discussion between and it's turned on to him by Daryl, but Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter, Blogging Heads TV, often engage this discussion, and it's a discussion from two highly educated, highly accomplished, quote unquote, highly privileged black men. And it's worth listening to. If you're turned off by listening to four white guys talk about race relations, which may in fact be true, that would be a good reference.
And Chortle, just one thing, just the one thing to add. You mentioned that the LGBTQ agendas comes in with the racial agenda. The feminist agenda comes on as well. Yeah. We've heard recently that black men are the white men of black people. So they're even turning on black men. If you look at Black Lives Matter, it's run by women and gay men. So strong, straight black men are going to be a target. And you're going to see the feminist impulse expand, I think, within even NAPARC circles with this.
Yeah, I meant to say that actually, that in every case I know of that you've got this at play in a NAPARC church, those who would be more radical in this way always are in favor of something like women preaching or having major roles in a worship service that we would think are not biblical. They're very much for female deacons or deaconesses. And if you listen carefully, they'll even, they're also advocates for something like quasi female elders, advisory councils, that sort of thing. So, yeah, you don't, female officers and maybe even female preaching goes right along with this. And we've seen it even with Beth Moore, who's whiter than any of us. I mean, she preaches, and you've got Christine Kane, who's a very woke and is a preacher, a female preacher, and some of these figures are extolled uncritically by the woke because they like part of what they say. Well, maybe they like all of it. Maybe that's always been the goal, is to get the whole package.
It's important, since we went here, to bring up the other side. There's a pendulum swing reaction that is just as nasty and just as wrong as regards patriarchalism. Doug Wilson, that group, who have used quote unquote the ravages of feminism to basically splinter the church and set women back to some medieval time where the husbands are lords and the women serve them in all ways and all things, and that's just as grotesque as any radical feminism. And quite frankly, within NAPARC, at least within conservative churches, I haven't seen a lot. Dan, you may see more of it in California in some of these alliances. I haven't seen a lot of this radical feminism. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I haven't seen much of it. But I have seen a lot of this heavy patriarchalism and this Doug Wilson influenced, and in our case here in San Antonio, Doug Phillips influenced crew, which is not borderline abusive, but has often been flat abusive and criminally so. So that needs to be said.
A woman.
A woman.
Yeah, no
No,
doubt.
you're exactly right, Sean. And I think it is more pervasive, even in NAPARC circles. The CRT woke crowd maybe gets more attention because they're louder, but the patriarchal movement within NAPARC churches, I think, is more insidious and more cancerous and will have more long-term damage.
Yeah, certainly at this point. I mean, within the PCA, certainly CRT, particularly at the time of the Race and Rec paper, was vying for some headway with them. But up until that point, certainly patriarchalism, if you want to look at errors, was one that was evident and prominent. And the PCA had to deal with it through Federal Vision and all of its attachments.
Yeah, and some of the people who would support the woke theology or methods, they bring this up, and they talk about patriarchy and that sort of thing, and it is real. And most people that have been church officers for a while in an NAPARC church, you get the refugees from Moscow, and
Yep.
And it's the women and children who suffer generally.
Yep.
And there are a lot of churches doing a lot of good, taking care of those families. And sometimes you want to send Doug Wilson the opposite of a thank you card for some of the things he's left us with.
Well, I know for a fact, this is confirmed information, that there are quite a few young men who are preparing for ministry who've been driven away from what we might call a mainstream complementarian position by these patriarchal guys. And they say, well, if that's complementarianism, I want nothing to do with it. And then they go to the other direction and embrace the woke stuff. So the patriarchal guys are not helping us one bit.
Yeah, one of the challenges for church members and officers in the next few years is going to be just keeping their eye on the ball, because, in the PCA since 2015, we've had a women's committee report, which, there's a lot of good stuff in there, but it also was sort of gave aid and comfort to those who would have, women doing everything in the script in the service except preaching the sermon, and gave aid and comfort to deaconesses, for instance. And we've had the racial reconciliation, and we've got actively in the PCA the whole revoice thing going on. So we've got three.
Yep.
And there's positive elements to each one of them, but there's a lot of dangerous stuff, more so in some than others, in each one of the three. And it's amazing that they all seem to track with the zeitgeist. They all seem to track with what we would see on The View. I mean, among us, only Sean watches The View, I'm sure, but MSNBC or whatever. Maybe I'm sure that's coincidental that we're tracking with the culture and the zeitgeist so perfectly.
Well, and this is the problem of and we've talked about it before, of 1K and 2K. 1K swings from conservative to progressive, but they're the same people. They just have a different political agenda. And so when Scripture presents you with this opportunity of a 2K understanding of the world, and so somebody like Dan can do his job and can preach the gospel and expand the kingdom of God without having to take a side and never having to take a side within the church politically, there's a great freedom in that. And that's what we're here for. I mean, we all like to fight. We all get out there and we come up with our political conclusions out there. But that's not what the church is for. The church is a minister of mercy. It's there to give us the gospel. As Machen would say, I don't want to hear about all my struggles all week, the conflicts I'm engaged in every day. I want a respite from that. And that's what the church is there to give us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to end, I think. Any closing words from you, Dan or Resby?
Keep an eye on California in the months ahead. What happens here will be coming to your doorstep soon.
Amen.
So,
that's right.
No, because we're going to build a wall around California. Resby, tell them what sort of wall.
Well, I did hear.
It's going to be big. It's going to be beautiful.
I did hear Newsom's new plan with all the people fleeing this state. The rumor is that you catch COVID as soon as you cross the border. So that's keeping people in California now.
Well,
yeah, we've taken our
it.
fill. Texas is closed. We've taken our fill. We're good. We cannot bear just even one more California refugee.
Well, they have to move to Abilene if they come.
We'll bury them in West Texas where nobody will find them. One of the two.
Yeah, somewhere between like Midland and Odessa sounds nice.
That's right.
Well, before we go, and before Resby tells everyone good night, I'm going to make a rare appeal. There are some upgrades to our streaming platform, and it would cost us about an extra $20 a month. If anybody wants to contribute to us through Patreon or do a small one-time gift, we could probably afford to upgrade a couple of things to give us 1080p on the streaming, give us multiple individual tracks on our guests, so if somebody's way loud or too quiet, we could fix that a little better. It would result in some improvements for listeners and viewers. We basically get enough money in now to pay for our hosting and our subscription to the service that we stream on. That's about $40, $50 a month, but a little more we could upgrade, and probably responsible to our wives that we not pay for all of that out of our pocket. So if any of the listeners want to help out, we'd appreciate it. But there's probably a better place for your money, and we recognize that too. So take it away, Resby.
Yeah, the last thing I was going to say about California was if we thought the Georgia runoffs were crazy, wait until Newsom's recall election. That is going to be an absolute atomic bomb and a nitroglycerin factory. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait to watch it from 2,400 miles away. So yeah. What else are we going to do? But again, thanks to everyone for. Wow, it sounds like Alanis Morissette is starting to come in through the background, but I know it's not her. But thanks to everyone for watching along live. Sean and Dan for coming on, especially on kind of short notice. Again, it's not like we really had to go out and find topics. They just sort of write themselves. But thanks to everyone for going. We hope if you're watching, we hope you enjoy the imagery of the Eye of Sauron watching over Washington, D.C. My last 2 points are the same as always. One is Sauron did nothing wrong, and secondly, don't be an Erdman.